Snow drifted against the cracked window as 67-year-old Eleanor Brooks set down 2 teacups on her worn oak table, one for herself, one for the husband who never came home. For 15 Christmas Eves, she'd done the same thing. No laughter. No lights. Only silence. Then came a gentle knock. Through the frosted glass, she saw a man in a flannel jacket and a little girl clutching a box of cookies. "Daddy says nobody should be alone on Christmas," the girl whispered. Before we dive in, drop a comment with where you're watching from, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories like this. Let's begin. Daniel Harper stood on the snow-coated stoop of a narrow brick row house, his breath turning to vapor as Grace squeezed his glove. Christmas Eve. The city's towers glowed behind them like cold constellations. Here, the block was dim, porches unlit, curtains drawn. He lifted the small bakery box Grace had decorated with a crooked star and knocked gently. Inside, footsteps paused. A chain slid. The door opened just enough to reveal an older woman with silver hair and a wary steadiness in her eyes. "Ma'am," Daniel said, voice kind but unsure. "We're neighbors." Grace baked cookies. "Nobody should be alone on Christmas." Grace held the box with both hands. "There's peppermint inside," she whispered, like it might break the spell. The woman looked at the empty street, the stubborn snow, the two of them shivering. Something softened. She undid the chain and opened the door wider. "I'm Eleanor." Warm air met them, tea, dust, and the faintest memory of cinnamon. 2 teacups waited on a small table. One had been set for a man who never came home. "Just for a minute," Daniel said automatically, already backpedaling. But Eleanor shook her head. "Just long enough for the water to boil," she said. Grace slid past him like sunlight, trailing damp boot prints. Daniel followed, feeling the odd tug of a moment that knew it mattered. Behind them, the porch remained dark, but the lamp over the kitchen sink flicked on, and it felt, against reason, like the whole block breathed in. Eleanor's hands moved by muscle memory, kettle on, tin of tea opened, a tiny clink of porcelain that sounded too loud in a house that had learned to be quiet. She watched the man and his little girl take in the room with respectful eyes, old photos, a folded flag in a shadow box, a firefighter's helmet polished more often than the floor. "Your husband?" Daniel asked softly. "John," she said. 15 Christmas Eves ago." She didn't add how neighbors had stopped knocking, how you can forget the shape of laughter if you stop inviting it. Grace pressed her chin to the table, peering at a photograph of a younger Eleanor and a broad-shouldered man in turnout gear. "He looks brave," she said. He was. Eleanor poured tea. "Peppermint smells like winter trying to be kind." Daniel smiled at that. Kindness trying, that was familiar ground. He wore a contractor's jacket that had seen better winters and a fatigue in the edges of his eyes, but he carried himself like a man determined to keep promises, especially to the child beside him. They talked about nothing first: snowplows, burnt cookies, the string of lights that shorted at the Harper place twice this week. Little things built a bridge until bigger ones might cross. When Eleanor finally asked about Grace's mother, Daniel's gaze dipped. "For years," he said. "Cancer. It's just us now." Eleanor nodded with the understanding of someone who knows how an empty chair can bend light. She pushed the sugar closer, a silent offering. Outside, wind pressed at the windows. Inside, 3 cups steamed like a small truce with the past. On the bookcase, a yellowed clipping lay beneath the helmet glass. Grace read aloud haltingly. "Firefighter gives life to save, family of 3. Daniel's hands stilled around his cup. "May I?" he asked. Eleanor hesitated, then lifted the glass and passed him the clipping. He scanned the date, December 24th, 15 years ago. Address, South Halsted Avenue. His throat closed. That was his old building, the one where a faulty space heater turned the hallway into a fuse. He'd been 20, newly married, asleep when smoke banged on the door louder than any fist. A stranger had carried his wife down the stairs while another voice called out routes like a calm map in a storm. He never learned names, sirens swallowed them. He looked up. The room tilted. Eleanor, the family of 3. Was you? She finished, the smallest tremor passing through her voice. She had never connected the dots, not until the way he stood to read, like a man who'd learned to steady himself fast. Daniel swallowed hard, shame and gratitude knotted together. I never thanked. I didn't know. Eleanor rested her hand on the shadow box. He didn't do it to be thanked, she said. But he would have liked to know you kept going. Grace watched her father with wide, worried eyes, as if the floor might open. Daniel knelt to her level. We were saved, kiddo. Before you were even a plan. The clock ticked, strange and tender. A life saved had circled back to knock on a widow's door. The kettle hissed again like a gentle scold. Eleanor moved to silence it and found herself straightening the small things, coasters, a faded runner, like a hostess waking up. I stopped decorating, she said, catching Daniel's glance at the bare window. Felt wrong to hang joy like tinsel over a hole. Daniel nodded. He understood holes. But Grace was already tugging at his sleeve. Our spare lights, Dad. He laughed softly. We do have a box of survivors. Eleanor lifted a brow. Survivors? Strings that worked yesterday and might betray us today, he said. But I'm handy with betrayal. 10 minutes later, they were on Eleanor's porch, bundled and breathless. Daniel tested sockets, looped cords over the railing, cursed under his breath at a stubborn section. Grace ran them back and forth like bright rope. Eleanor hovered, half scandalized by the mess, half charmed by the bustle. Across the street, a curtain twitched. Someone noticed. Someone always notices when dark houses start humming again. Daniel plugged in the last strand. For a heartbeat, nothing. He jiggled the connection and the porch washed in warm gold, uneven, imperfect, miraculous. Eleanor's hand flew to her mouth. Not bad for survivors, he said. She stood in the doorway, haloed by the new glow, older and younger at once. I didn't think I'd see this again, she whispered. Lights just borrowed, Daniel said, surprising himself. We pass it around till we all have enough. A car slowed. The driver looked up, smiled, kept going. It felt like the block said, quietly, more of this. Morning brought plow mounds and pink sky. Daniel returned with a small pine and a roll of stubborn ribbon. Grace marched like a pageant marshal. Eleanor made pancakes, an act that felt like treason against 15 years of toast. They were threading paper stars when a knock came sharp and officious. A man in a wool coat stood on the porch, boots too clean for this street. He looked past Eleanor's shoulder, taking inventory. Ms. Brooks, he said, producing a card. Howard Finch, Finch and Field Realty. You haven't returned our letters. Eleanor's spine, so newly softened, straightened again. Finch noticed the new lights and smirked. Sentimental. But let's be practical. Our offer remains generous. We can close before New Year's. Daniel stepped forward before he thought better of it. She's not selling. Finch's eyes slid to him with polite disdain. And you are? Neighbor, Daniel said. Human. Finch smiled the way people smile before they say something unkind. Property values trend a certain way. Holding on is unwise. Eleanor's fingers trembled around the card. After John, she had signed papers she didn't read. Loneliness made ink look inevitable. She'd ignored letters, hoping that was the same as strong. Daniel took the card, turned it over. Give us a week, he said. Finch shrugged. By then the number changes. He tipped his hat at the lights. Nice touch, he said, and left footprints shaped like threats. Eleanor's breath wavered. She hated needing help. Hated more that she did. Daniel slid the card into his pocket like a promise. "We'll handle it." "How?" Eleanor asked. He didn't know yet. But the word felt right in his mouth. "Together." At the non-profit legal clinic tucked between a bodega and a locksmith, Daniel learned 3 things. Predatory offers love widows, Eleanor's mortgage had fine print with teeth, and good people with overfull calendars still show up when someone knocks kindly enough. Reverse the lien, challenge the predatory clause, stop contact in writing, the attorney said, already drafting. Also, don't be alone when he returns. Daniel nodded, copying phrases onto a page that already carried lists for wood deliveries and Grace's school party. His phone buzzed. A contractor client needed a Christmas Day emergency patch on a broken boiler. He did the math he hated, hours versus groceries, and decided in the space between heartbeats to say yes. He wished he could live on principles alone. Rent 8 principles for breakfast. On the subway back, Grace slept against his arm. Daniel watched his reflection ride in the dark window, a man shouldering more than he could carry, and carrying it anyway. He thought of John Brooks walking into smoke and decided paperwork could be a kind of rescue, too. Eleanor was waiting with a box from her attic. "John's old ornaments," she said. "They smell like dust and December." They hung them slowly, a memorial turned mosaic. Daniel balanced the star in his palm. "You sure?" Eleanor looked at the star's bent tip and smiled. He'd hate the dust more than the grief. They lifted it together. For the first time, Eleanor didn't apologize to the space where his voice used to be. Back at his apartment, Daniel rolled blueprints and receipts off the kitchen table and opened a cigar box he rarely touched. Inside, a tattered hospital bracelet, a photo of Grace at 2 with frosting on her chin, and a folded sheet, the fire report from South Halsted Avenue. He'd sent for it after Grace was born, as if facts could make gratitude practical. He read the line again, lead, Captain J. Brooks. Beside it, a note in cramped print, Eleanor's handwriting from a survivor list he'd never seen, family of 3 unknown. He closed his eyes. Unknown had always felt like a debt he couldn't pay. Now it had an address and a porch light. His phone vibrated. Finch. He ignored it. Then a second buzz, the clinic attorney texted a draft letter to halt contact. "Bring Ms. Brooks to sign tomorrow. We'll file Monday." He exhaled a prayer to men who ran into burning stairwells and to women who learned to outlast winters. Grace padded out in pajamas, hair static with sleep. "Did the lady like our lights?" "She did," he said, pulling her close. "And we're going to help her keep them." "How?" "Same way we do everything," he said. "One fix at a time." He watched the city chew up clouds and spit out flurries. Somewhere, an ambulance's distant wail became just another thread in the city's song. He chose faith in small tools, a socket set, a printer, a hand that could hold on to another's long enough to cross the street. Word moves weirdly on city blocks, quicker than gossip, slower than truth. By afternoon, neighbors Daniel barely knew appeared with casseroles and strings of lights. Someone brought a ladder. Someone else, a toolbox older than Eleanor's house. "Thought she might need backup," said Mrs. Alvarez from 2 doors down, plant-strong arms hefting a bin of extension cords. She remembered John, remembered how his laugh used to shake the fence. Finch returned at dusk with a colder smile and a different folder. He did not expect to find half the block on Eleanor's lawn, stringing lights like a picket line of stars. "This is harassment," he declared. "It's Christmas," Mrs. Alvarez said. "And we like our neighbor." Daniel stepped forward with the attorney's letter. "You'll direct all contact through counsel," he said, voice steady in a way that surprised even him. Finch's expression faltered, then reset. "An offer has a shelf life," he warned. Eleanor stood on the porch, shoulders squared but eyes bright. "Some things last," she said, and lifted the extension cord like a baton. The porch blazed again. A cheer went up that felt like a thaw. Finch looked at the faces, old, young, tired, determined, and did the arithmetic of resistance. He tucked the folder under his arm and retreated to his car. In the sudden quiet, Eleanor touched Daniel's sleeve. "I don't remember the last time people gathered for me." "Not for you," he said gently. "With you." She looked at the block, at the ridiculous tangle of lights, at Grace wrapped like a candy cane in a scarf, and let herself believe him. Snow began again, soft this time, falling through the glow like confetti trying to behave. Daniel fixed a loose plug, Eleanor handed out mugs, Grace assigned jobs with the unquestioned authority of a small person in boots. Laughter grew unafraid of its own volume. In the kitchen, Eleanor pulled a small velvet pouch from a drawer. "I had this made for John's retirement," she said. "He never got there." She opened it to reveal a silver keychain engraved with a single word, hope. She pressed it into Daniel's hand. "You brought the word back to this house." He shook his head. "You kept the seat warm for it." From the porch they watched the block transform, windows waking, candles blinking to the street, a teenager across the way carefully placing a paper lantern like a wish he was embarrassed to say aloud. It wasn't opulent. It was more honest than that. Daniel cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I think, about that night, your husband saved more than our bodies. He taught me a rule I didn't even hear then, you run toward need." He glanced at Grace who was carefully not listening. "I forgot it for a while after Hannah died. Tonight I remembered." Eleanor's eyes shone, not with grief exactly, but with release. "Then he's still doing his job." The kettle whistled again. Some rituals don't end, they just learn new verses. Eleanor left the porch light on as she went to pour. A year later the block had a name, the Lantern Line, born of a group chat and too many extension cords. The clinic's paperwork had done its quiet work, Finch and Field stopped calling. Eleanor, once a silhouette in her own window, became the person other widows texted at midnight. On Christmas Eve, Daniel and Grace knocked without knocking, the door already open. They brought homemade cookies with too much peppermint, a tradition Grace insisted was law. Neighbors filed in, trailing snow and stories. The house handled the weight like it had been waiting. After the circuit breakers survived their annual trial, the three of them stepped onto the porch. The city pulsed beyond, all glass and motion. Here, the street glowed like a small, stubborn miracle. Daniel slid the silver keychain from his pocket and handed it to Grace. "Borrow this for a while," he said. "What if I lose it?" she asked, serious. "Then we'll make another," Eleanor said. "Hope's not limited edition." They laughed, easy and unafraid. Daniel looked at Eleanor, less alone, more herself, and felt that quiet click when something finds where it belongs. "Funny," he said, "how a light bulb and a cookie box can rearrange a year." "Or how one knock can rearrange a life," Eleanor replied. They didn't speak then, just listened while the block breathed in unison. The porch light burned warm and steady, not a memorial now but a beacon. People drifted toward it without thinking, neighbors, delivery drivers, a kid from 3 streets over who'd lost his dog. "Leave it on," Eleanor said softly. "Always," Daniel answered, and meant it. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe for more stories that stay with you.